Hi, my name is Sun Moon Lee. I'm a pediatrician at the Pediatric Diagnostic Center. As you already know, COVID-19 sucks. The year 2020 has really sucked also. Well, the Lakers won, the Dodgers won. If you're a Chargers fan, I really can't help you. So over the past few weeks, you've probably heard things such as a vaccine is coming, and you've probably been informed that you're a frontline worker and that you're first in line to get the vaccine. So among those things, you've probably heard things like, yes, definitely get the vaccine. You have to get the vaccine. Or you've heard, don't get the vaccine. It's going to kill you. That is not true. But all this information probably has you really confused. So give me a few minutes. Let's talk about vaccines. In 1796, there was a man named Edward Jenner who noticed that milkmaids who had had cowpox before were not getting sick with smallpox. And so he took the ooze, it's disgusting, I know, he took the ooze of blisters from people who had cowpox and inoculated it into an 8-year-old boy. And boom, we had a vaccine. Now, vaccines have come a long way since that time, and the technology behind vaccines, that's come a long way also. But the fear of vaccines and the fear that new vaccines are going to cause harm, now that's been around since probably 1797. But be assured that with proper research, proper testing, vaccines are very safe and can be very, very effective. So, why do vaccines work? So basically it works like this. Fluid gets injected into your body and it provokes an immune response. And that immune response gives your body memory so that if you happen to come across an infection, the antibodies will be produced so you can fight off the infection very easily or not even get sick. What it does not do is actually make you sick. And we're going to talk more about that later. So this statement is actually false. In 2002, there was a new respiratory illness that, like a pneumonia, that mysteriously showed up in Asia. What they found was that it was caused by a virus called SARS-CoV. Turned out to be a coronavirus. And because at the time, there was a lot of infections going around and it was a very serious and deadly infection, they started putting money and research into developing a vaccine. What they found in the research was that the best way to make a vaccine was against the spike protein that you commonly see in pictures of the coronavirus that gives it its name of corona. But when SARS never came to North America, all the funding for the research disappeared and the research stopped. Now, fast forward to 2019 and COVID-19 hits, and these mysterious respiratory illnesses that were in China, guess what? They were also from a coronavirus, and they were termed SARS-CoV-2. And it turned out these viruses had the same type of proteins that we had in SARS. And so what did they do? They took all the research they did in 2003 and 2004, and they applied it to make a new vaccine right now. So really, the research that we're using now actually came from 18 years ago. So you've likely already heard that there's two vaccines that are coming out very soon. One is the Moderna vaccine, and one is the Pfizer vaccine. Both use what's called mRNA technology. So, what's mRNA? mRNA is something that your genetic material, or your DNA, makes in your cells. It basically makes everything that's within your body, your skin, your lungs, everything. So in the vaccines, if vaccines only had mRNA, it wouldn't do anything. So scientists put basically a fat layer around that mRNA so that it can actually get incorporated into your cells. And from there, it can make the proteins that are necessary to make an immune response that we need in a vaccine. And in our vaccine, the mRNA makes the spike protein. Is the vaccine safe? In short answer, yes. In the Pfizer study, they did studies on 42,000 people, which means 21,000 people got the vaccine. In the Moderna study, they studied roughly 30,000 people. And in all of those people that got the vaccine, the most common thing that they saw were people would have body aches, chills, or fevers. Now, that does not mean they got sick. What it means is that their immune system made a really good immune response. And to be completely honest, when I get my vaccine, I actually want to get the fever and the chills. The reason is it means that the vaccine is actually working and my body is making a really good immune response. I know due to the talk about Operation Warp Speed that commonly people that think that this vaccine was rushed. But when it came to the safety aspects of the trials for these vaccines, they were not rushed and they weren't compromised. But when it comes to a new vaccine, you do what we always do. You test it on mice, and then you test it on monkeys, and then you test it on humans. Well, they've been doing mRNA vaccine research on mice for years before COVID-19 ever showed up. So this is once again another example about how technology has been working far before we ever heard about it, but now that it's here, we're able to implement it very quickly. So in an experiment like the one Pfizer and Moderna did, they take a population, half gets the vaccine, the other half gets placebo, which is basically salt water. And then they looked at for possible side effects, such as cold-like symptoms like body aches and chills and headaches. But the cool thing is that the participants and the scientists don't know who got what. So that way there's no bias and you can't say that they were fudging the numbers. The phase 3 study of the Pfizer and the Moderna study, they basically had the two groups go and live their life. And what they found was that the placebo group got sick 9 times more than the vaccine group. And that's why you're hearing these numbers of 90 to 95% effective. I know what you're thinking. mRNA is going to mess with my genetics. No, it won't. This is not going to become the beginning of The Walking Dead. Dr. Fankhauser is not going to become the leader of a zombie apocalypse because of the vaccine. Think of this in a 3-step term. DNA makes mRNA that makes the proteins that make the spike protein in coronavirus. Just like tomatoes can be made into canned tomatoes and then gets made into spaghetti sauce. The canned tomato, the mRNA part of it, the canned tomato does not go back into becoming an actual tomato, or it doesn't end up going back into seed, and you can't grow tomatoes from your canned tomatoes. So you don't trust the vaccine companies and you think they're basically just trying to make money off of you. And part of that is true. But the thing you should realize is that during the phase 3 studies that we were talking about, is that there was an independent person who was looking at the data while it was happening. That person is the person who told the vaccine companies that they were allowed to stop the trials. And then that data was then collected by the companies and then submitted to the FDA, another group called the ACIP. Both of those do not work for the vaccine companies. They look at the data just to make sure that it's safe and effective. That's all they care about. And believe me, they don't want to release an unsafe vaccine, because if something bad happens with this COVID-19 vaccine, then people aren't going to want their tetanus shots. They're not going to want their polio shots. They're not going to want their measles shots. And they do want people to get vaccinated. One of the most common questions that's asked me is, what are the possible side effects 5 to 10 years later? And to be honest, we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. But when it comes to vaccine, major side effects happens 1 to 2 months after the vaccine is given. The likelihood that a major side effect is going to happen 5 to 10 years after a vaccine is given is completely unlikely. And that's why the FDA feels so comfortable in calling this vaccine safe. How long would the immunity last? Well, we don't know. And that's why it's important for the scientists to continue to look at the immunity in people who've gotten the vaccine to see how long it does last. But at the same time, if you look at the antibody response that people have had with the vaccine, it seems to be just as good as the people who actually got the infection itself. And so that is a pretty good sign that the immunity is going to be lasting. So I'm sure you guys have more questions, and I'm sure that this video was not complete enough to answer all the questions that are out there. But what I would encourage you to do is talk to the healthcare professionals who you work with. And if they don't have the answers, they should be able to point you in the right direction of people who do. And if you see me walking around, stop me, ask me questions. I'm happy to answer more questions about this. But let me finish with this thought. To hit herd immunity, for life to go back to normal, we need to get 75 to 85% of Americans to get the vaccine. If we try to get herd immunity naturally, we're going to have millions of people die in the United States. But let's say you are thinking, I want to wait till March, April, or May to get the vaccine. If that happens, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine may not be available to you. At that point, you might be required to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine. And the problem is, those are not mRNA vaccines. So we don't know yet if those vaccines are as effective or if they're as safe. And also, when those vaccines come out, the safety understanding is just going to be where we are right now. So you're not going to be in any better of a place to get a vaccine then than now. Well, that's about all I have to say. I'm going to leave you with something from Dr. Fauci. This guy right here, the guy I totally have a man crush on. He's also, this is one of my med school books. And this is basically the Bible of medicine, but he was an author there. Going to leave you with a thing that he said about when he was asked whether or not he would take the vaccine.
Having looked at the process by where this vaccine and how this vaccine was tested, the evaluation of the data by the Data and Safety Monitoring Board, the intense scrutiny given to the data by both the career FDA scientists and the FAAP Advisory Committee, and knowing what I know personally, having gone over the data, definitely I will get vaccinated, and I will get vaccinated publicly in order to show that, in fact, I am willing to get vaccinated. And I would recommend it to my wife and my 3 daughters that they get vaccinated when their time comes.
Oh, and one more thing. All those animations, all those things, I ripped those off the internet. I am not that creative. So if anybody sees that, please don't sue me, because really, I'm just trying to get public awareness up.